All right, and with that, I want to thank you again for joining us for this month's rendition of the Elevate Northwest series focused on cybersecurity. Before we get started, I do want to thank our event sponsors today, Seattle Public Utilities, Rich King County, and Business Health Trust. Thank you for your continued support of the Chamber's programming. I would also like to thank our small business champions here at the Chamber, Kaiser Permanente, Boeing, JLL, and Amazon. Thank you for your continued support of our work with small businesses. And with that, I will welcome our speaker, Roseann Freitas. Roseann is a Public Relations and Communications Manager for the Better Business Bureau, Great West and Pacific. That's a tongue twister. With over 25 years of experience in public relations, communication, marketing, and consumer outreach. In addition, she brings her expertise in understanding small business operations to the Better Business Bureau. Roseann sits on various boards and committees, including Executive Women International, National Kitchen and Bath Association, and the Building Industry Association. So thank you so much for joining us, Roseann. I will stop my screen share now and you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Vivian, and thank all of you for attending today. I know how hard it is to carve that out of your schedule anymore. So, and also because we've been online for so long now, sometimes it's a little hard to commit to it. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And let me get that there for you guys. So here we go. So I'm assuming you can see my screen, right? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. Thank you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and basics for business. So you're seeing the whole screen. You're not seeing the pictures of you guys on the side, right? Vivian, or okay, just you. I just want to make sure I shared the right one and so I don't mess up this. Okay, so we're going to talk about cybersecurity and why it's important. First, before we start, as Vivian said, my name is Roseann Freitas. Instead of using my traditional headshot on some of my PowerPoints, I decided to do one during the pandemic that reflected the pandemic, right? The work from home. So that was my new headshot. So that's what you're seeing there. I guess now that we're not completely isolated, I can get that back out. But just a little bit about BBB. Many people know us. You probably know us either as the complaints people or the scam people. Just to let you know, there's a little bit more to it than that. But how it started was actually 1912. It had to do with Samuel C. Dobbs, who you see pictured here, and Coca-Cola. They were in a lawsuit that had to do with advertising. And the lawyer said to Samuel C. Dobbs, why? All advertising is exaggerated. Nobody really believes it. And that was the day of the magic elixir. Nobody believed anything. And that is actually how the Better Business Bureau became, because Samuel C. Dobbs said, this isn't right. He got a bunch of executives together, not just at Coca-Cola, but other companies, and they started policing each other to make sure that they were telling the truth in their ads. So that's actually how we got started. And our mission is to be the leader in advancing marketplace trust. And that's really our goal. It's between the business and the consumer. And we just want that ethical playing field. We do it by setting standards of trust, and they look very simplistic while on the screen, while you're looking at them. There is a lot more to them, and I don't need to read them all aloud to you, but I just want you to know that today we are actually going to talk about one of those, and that is the safeguard privacy. So that is where cybersecurity falls, as well as other avenues where you're maintaining that privacy of not just the customer, but your employees as well as your vendors. So here's the easiest way for you to secure all your devices, just to make sure absolutely no one hacks in, and that is to turn them all off. That's not always effective, right? We know that. So how do we completely secure our devices? Well, this little wheel kind of gives you an understanding of a plan. And we're going to talk a lot about this wheel. But today we're going to really focus and hone in on that protect side. But let me just we'll start with what identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover are, but we're really going to hone in on that protect side. Also, to let you all know, so you don't have to take notes super quickly or snapshots, I will be sharing my PowerPoint with Vivian so she can send that out to everybody. So you have your copies. So when we talk about identifying, you have to first know what it is that needs protecting in your business. So when you have your internet and what it is connected to, what information needs to be protected. So first and foremost, identify what that is and understand what common cyber attacks that can be used against your business are. And of course, the risks and costs of not being prepared for a cyber attack. Those are kind of an important thing. One stat, which we'll do a little poll later, so I'm not going to share it with you, but I'm going to give you a little hint. I'm going to ask you how many businesses won't survive if there was a cyber attack. And we're talking small businesses. So it really helps to identify what's in your system from all of your computers to also the information that you have. When you have information concerning your customers' address, name, and any other pertinent, personally identifiable information, you are at risk. But also that applies to your employees as well. And we do know that unfortunately, when these bad actors get hold of that information, they can start to steal people's identities and really cause a nightmare for someone along the way. And the reason this is so important to businesses is that, remember, your client trusts you and your customer or your employee and your vendors trust you with this information. And when someone hacks into your system, it erodes the trust they have in you. So you also have an issue of helping them remedy any repercussions from their identity or information being stolen, but you also have to rebuild that trust back up. So I remember how I mentioned we're going to talk a lot on this protect side, because obviously we know protecting it is probably our best source. Now, that doesn't mean we don't deal with the afterward. We'll get there. But let's start with this protect. The number one way most things come in, it's through employees, and it's not malicious. They are not doing this intentionally just to get at anybody. It's just they don't always know. And a lot of times it comes in such an innocent way that they don't see it. So training is going to be key to any of this. Part of that training, also in things that you want to do, is when we talk about those firewalls, we're going to talk encryption, strong passwords, all of that is helping us protect it and actively assess and manage that cyber risk. So we talk this employee training. So you know how you already have training, you might have onboarding or different things or safety, depending what industry you're in. Now, here comes another training that you need really to think about including into your employee training. So you have to train employees and establish those principles on security. It's really easy. I think we all do it where we have our phone near us and we may be at work and we're checking on our social media or we're looking up things, and it's really easy to get caught up and possibly with the work computer access a site or link that could actually pull in some malware and other bad things into our system to corrupt it. So having employees understand the why, that's probably your biggest thing here. Why is it important for you as a company to maintain this? And that's because it does erode the trust. It also puts everyone's information at risk. We talk strong passwords. We're going to talk about appropriate internet use guidelines. Does your company have that? Do you even have a policy that tells an employee what they can or cannot do with the company computer? Some companies do, and they have it where they can't actually access some programs, especially social media. Now, if you're like me, I'm in the PR comms world or people in marketing, we actually have to have access to that because that's part of our world. But still having a plan and a process in place, some descriptions that describe what they can or cannot link on. But the key is always understanding the why. I think that's where you get the best buy-in on any change, is if they understand the why of it. So when we talk about passwords, the one I hate is this unique password, change it every 3 months. I don't know about you guys. I can't even remember my password most of the time. I really wish I could call on these bad actors when I'm trying to get into my account so they can help me get in. Okay, maybe not really, but it does really recommend that you change these every 3 months. Also consider multi-factor authentication, which is a second step. On top of this password, now you have another way to authenticate that this is the correct person. And then when you're dealing with vendors, especially like banks or financial institutions, see if they have those same authentication for your accounts. As many of us know, when we go into our bank account anymore, a lot of times they'll send us a text message or find different ways to authenticate exactly who we are. So when we talk this multi-factor authentication, you've heard it, you've probably seen it in many ways, and I just alluded to the text message. So it could be the security questions that you answer. It could be the code that is sent to another device. It could also be your fingerprint, your face. It's funny, one of my phones, my business phone is my face, my personal phone is my fingerprint. And it just varies so that it tells them that it's me. Also, you can do it by GPS location. So there's a multitude of programs out there and ways to make sure you have that extra step. Very important, even if you are a small business, because small businesses are targets. It's not just the big companies like the Equifax. We all remember that one from a few years back. They go for all businesses because unfortunately, small business tends to not have as much security as the larger companies who have the resources to do that. So they go after you guys too. So remember that. So when we talk passwords, I mentioned that, right? Did you know 17% of passwords include your favorite sports team and your birth year? Well, it's easy for us to remember. So a lot of times now they're recommending this passphrase, not just a word, but a phrase, because one is probably going to be longer, right, in digits. And of course, you'll have to add in some numbers, but it's something you can remember a little easier. But the more characters you can add, the harder it becomes to hack. Cleaning your machine. Now, I'm not talking just dusting it off, which is probably what mine could use, but it's talking about cleaning it and making sure there are no viruses there. And how we do that? Well, you make sure a couple of ways. First of all, you make sure you update your software all the time. We get those notifications on our phones, our iPads, our computers that it's time to update with the latest security patch. And for a lot of people, they hesitate to do it because it does change things and we've kind of gotten used to it. Well, the reason we have to do it is there has been found a weakness. And this patch is to address that weakness so hackers cannot get into it. Really important that we always stay on top of that. And you need to stress that to employees. If you see this update, you have to do it. Also, you can all set it up to automatically update, but it does a lot of times have to be plugged in and charging when you do that. And then the antivirus software that you see, you can run a scan. Now, none of us want to run a scan when we're trying to work because it takes too much bandwidth, it slows us down, but you set it to run after hours. And you want to set that to run on somewhat of a consistent basis so that you're constantly catching things. So set it up for auto, and then nobody has to worry about doing it themselves. So firewalls, and I don't know about you guys, whenever I think firewall, you know, I see this wall up and the fire coming at it. And I don't know why they came up with the word, but it actually really does describe it, I guess. And so the firewall is really that wall that's set up to stop those outsiders from coming into that system, into your system. And like anything else, if it's not up to date, it's not enabled, it's not going to work. And a lot of times people will disable them because it slows the system down, but then it opens you up for somebody to come into your system. So you want to make sure it is always enabled. Tell them they cannot turn it off. And also, if they're working from home, they need to make sure the home system is protected by a firewall. Now, we're going to talk a little bit also about remote workers because that has changed in the last few years. How about your mobile device? I can work from my Surface, which is what I'm presenting to you on today. Also from my work phone, I can access all the company programs. So what about a mobile device plan? I mean, people might understand, hey, on my work computer, I can't access these sites. But they don't necessarily see that the mobile device is different. Now, I'm going to tell you, if they're using their own personal mobile device, you have a much harder time telling them what to do when they're paying their own bill. So if it really is important to keep it separate and you really need them to have that cell phone, then you probably want to make sure they have a separate cell phone for work. It is an additional expense, but it's a lot cheaper than a hack or a breach of your system. But you want to make sure that those are password or passphrase protected, and that any information going out will stay encrypted. And of course, keeping that up to date with all of those security patches that come in. And then have a plan for any lost or stolen equipment. Really good, because remember, there's information on these, and should somebody be able to get in, you need to be able to protect it. So set up that procedure that if they lose their cell phone or their computer, they have to report it to somebody, so that you can start that, so you know what information is out there and how you need to stop it. Here's the one that's going to save everybody, and that is making backup copies. You want to do this on a regular basis. You don't want to do it every 6 months, or probably even every month. If you do a lot of data every single day, you might want to back it up every day, or at least once a week. And the reason for this is, if someone should access your system and say they were to take hold of it and not let you in, you could at least go back to the last backup and start over. That's why you don't want it to be too long, because you only want to have to catch up a little bit of work, not months worth of it. But those backup copies, they should be stored off of your site. They should not be kept where you're keeping the current one. And that's where the cloud can come in as a storage, because remember, once somebody's hacked one system, they're in there, they've got access to all of it. So you need it to be in a separate place they can't get to. So what should be backed up? Well, of course, any financial information. Also your HR, your employee information, all of that personal identifiable information. Accounts receivable and payable, because you need to know the money that's coming in and going out. Any of those important documents, from word processing to spreadsheets to databases, anything that you need to keep your business going should always be backed up. If you remember nothing from this presentation, this is the key, is backup. Also, when we talk about physical access and user accounts, a lot of times we set people up to have access to everything in the system, whether they really need it or not. So think about it. Does this person need access to the entire computer system? Like if they're not in the accounting department, they wouldn't need access to the programs that relate to accounting. And part of that is just maintaining security, but also you're protecting this person as well as yourself. Also, train your employees to lock their computers when they walk away. The funny one here, when I started with the Better Business Bureau, is if you walked away from your computer and you hadn't locked it, IT found it, they'd come in and they'd mess up your whole desktop. And then you would spend the rest of the day trying to figure it out. Now, I think it was a little extreme, but I get the point, is don't leave it unattended, because people then can access it. Having a separate user account for each employee that requires that strong password or phrase, very important. And of course, any administrative privileges are given only to the trusted staff and IT people who need it. So we talked a little bit about how our computers or our phones should be secure, but how about our Wi-Fi networks? We know we can go into public space and share Wi-Fi, but it's public space. And you get that notification that says other people might be able to see what you're doing. Well, this is work information and personal information. We don't really want other people to see it. So you want to make sure it's secured, encrypted, and hidden, so you can hide it where it doesn't pop up in Wi-Fi networks. Also, make sure it's password protected. So the router itself can have a password associated with it. And the key is, don't just stick with the manufacturer's default settings. You do want to change all of that. I threw this one in on payment cards as well, because I think it's really important. When we talk about accepting payment cards, most of you are running it through some third-party vendor. And usually they will also have tools. And anybody who's worked with these merchants know you're jumping through hoops these days to show that you're secure. So you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to protect that information, and that so are your employees. One thing that's kind of really important is isolating your payment systems from your less secure programs. So if you need to surf the net and research different things, you want to make sure that payment system is not connected in any way to that. Keep it separate and isolated so that it is always protected. Limit employee access, not just for you, but for them. It's a protection all the way around. I kind of mentioned it a minute ago about you don't want just one employee with access to all of the systems. You want that check and balance. And it does protect employees as well as the employer. Also, don't allow them to install any software without permission. And I know with mine, I can't download anything without getting permission. Yes, it's a bit of a headache. But again, maybe I'm trying to download something I shouldn't, and I'm just not aware that I shouldn't be doing that. So again, making that in place. Remember, this is your computer system that needs to be protected. How about working remote? I don't know about you. I am still working remote 2.5 years later. And I will be, because the nature of what we do allows for it. But when people started to work from home, it kind of opened up a new way of doing things. And for some people, they had their home computer, but they didn't have a dedicated work computer at home. So they were using their home computer. And that begins where some problems arise. And it's not uncommon for small businesses not to be able to afford to send computers home with everybody, right? So if you cannot give your employee a dedicated work computer, laptop, or any other device, then you need to make sure that they have different user accounts on what they're using at home, and only they have access to the work information. Also, transferring data back and forth from office to home, well, it's only good if you know how secure that home is. But however, if some sort of virus gets into their system, it will get onto that USB, and then therefore it could be entered into your system. So be careful on allowing that transfer of information back and forth. You always want them to make sure they keep their data private, and that their antivirus and firewall software, everything is completely up to date. And the hard one, limit who has access to home Wi-Fi. Ooh, I know about you guys. I mean, a lot of people, they come over and they get their Wi-Fi passwords, but the more people are using their home and have that home password and your work computer is on it, it opens you up for some security breach. So we talked a lot of different ways about protecting it. So we did the identify and protect. And now we're going to talk a little bit about detecting. You want to have company policies about how to detect it. And some of that is going to be that scanning, right? That antivirus software scanning. There are other ways to kind of tell when your computer is starting to act a little funny. And we're going to talk more in depth about that when we get into the fraud section here. But keeping everything updated with the latest and greatest on the antivirus software is really important, but also educating employees on how to recognize cyber attacks. And also on the latest fraud that is impacting their community. Really, you have to say it over and over, because some people may or may not have heard it. But education is important so that they understand, just as your policy, depending on what company you have, we all have different policies, whether it's a dress code or how you talk to a customer, what you do, this is the same thing. It's all about education. So what happens if you detect that you have a breach of some sort? Now you have to have a response plan. So these 5 steps should be a plan. You should have a plan together, just as you have a marketing plan, a business plan. You kind of want to have this cybersecurity plan and kind of a crisis plan, which would be the response side. So the last thing you want to do is do a response plan while you're going through it. You want to have that in place. And the key to that is to go ahead and plan it out. Pick someone, and it doesn't have to be the most tech savvy person, but it does have to be someone who's organized, and they're leading it so that they know, okay, this has happened. And then they can start this checklist and making a checklist of what do we have to do now that this has happened? Because if people's information has been breached, you have to let the customer know. The sooner you let the customer know, the sooner you're going to start to build that trust back. I'm sure there are probably a few people on this call, like myself, where I have gotten notification that my account has been breached, and it's 6 months later. Well, I really wish they'd have figured it out. I get sometimes they don't figure it out right away, but still, by the time they figured it out and the time they told me, there was quite a lapse of time, which the criminals aren't going to wait. They're just going to go ahead and start. So the sooner you can start to share with your customer what has happened and the steps you are taking to remedy the situation, the better for your business. But this is where you might want to also bring in an outside person to help you put this all together and give you that simple and low cost risk assessment for your business. How risky is it in what you do and the information that you have? But of course, you're going to have to actively manage it. Yes, as a business owner, you're wearing the accountant's hat, the marketing hat. You're wearing so many hats. Here's another one. But you want to stay on top of it, or you want to hire someone who can. And I'm not just talking about doing a random Google search and the pop-up comes up. You need to find someone you can trust. There are various ways you can do that. Obviously, word of mouth, someone who's used it before. Obviously, I'm going to recommend bbb.org where you can go and vet them, but you need to make sure this person is trustworthy. And then after you respond, it's that recover time. And that's a big part of this is learning how to limit the time and the money spent on that recovery process. That's why planning ahead is going to be important, because if it's planned in advance and you have that step, you're going to get through it faster, because you're going to need to get rid of all of the malicious software and code that is on your system. However, depending on the type of fraud, you'll also need to contact the FBI. And yeah, this is a big issue. Cyber crimes are huge, and the FBI is very involved in chasing it. So here is the local contact information for the Seattle area, should you need to contact the FBI. So we talked about those 5 steps, but now I want to talk about also some of the why. When I told you to mention to the why to your employees, this is why. We're going to talk about the fraud that impacts it and why cybersecurity is so important. So you probably have all heard the terms malware, ransomware, phishing, and not the phishing, the computer phishing. So we have a lot of these terms that we have to deal with, but what are they? So malware is just short. They took the words malicious and software. Malware, that's how we got it. So you've heard them. It's Trojan horses, computer viruses, worms, basically anything that's coming into your platform, your internet, your digital world, and hostily taking over. How can it happen? It can be simple, just an email that comes in, you click on the link or open that attachment, and both have that follow through of downloading information onto your computer with or without you even knowing what they're doing. That's the problem. You can get it also on your cell phone. I now do not click on any links that are sent to me by anybody, because I just don't know. So to be safe, I just don't click on it. But especially if you didn't solicit it, you get that email from random somebody or the text, you didn't solicit this information. So for sure, don't click on it. And make sure you share that with your employees. Just because you get an email saying, here is a fax, and you need to respond, doesn't mean you need to open that. Okay? Because that's how they're doing it. They're trying to scare us and intimidate us into opening this, or even playing on our curiosity. So how do you know if this is happening? And this kind of goes back to how can you detect if there's an issue with your computer? Well, you start to get all of those unwanted pop-ups, which we all hate. You start to look at your desktop and it starts to look different. You start to see things that weren't there before. You start to run out of space. All of a sudden, your hard drive is really getting full. And you're like, hold it, how did that happen? I don't remember saving that much stuff. You start to get unusual messages or even programs that start just automatically that you didn't put onto your system. Then the computer starts to go a little slower and a little slower and a little slower, and eventually can crash. So all of those you start to see happening to your computer could be an indicator that something is on your system that shouldn't be. And that really is a great time now to make sure you update that scan and get everything up to date. So this is an alarming number. From June of 2016 to December 2021, the FBI says the global cost of business email compromise is $43 billion. And that is growing. And it will continue to grow. So what is that business email compromise? Well, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's where you get that email coming in your inbox and they're phishing. And it seems harmless, right? Click here or go to this website. But they're trying to entice you, and they're enticing you with emotion, from curiosity to maybe fear because you don't know what this is. So who are they targeting? Well, they're going after business. They're going after government. They're going after nonprofits. That really doesn't leave anybody out. They're going after anybody. And what do they want? They want money, gift cards, cryptocurrency. And the big one there is that personal information, because with personal information, you can start opening accounts and really make life miserable for somebody. So business email compromise at $43 billion is a big chunk of money. So how does it look and what does it look like? And some of this, many of you might have seen, all of a sudden you get an email that looks like it's either from the president of the company, the CEO, somebody of authority, and asking you to wire money somewhere or go buy gift cards and send those, right? Or send cryptocurrency. The one that may be a little harder, depending on the size of your business, is you get a vendor or one of your suppliers and their invoice payment is now being redirected to a different bank account or a different mailing address. And it's not uncommon for that to happen. However, it could be a scam. So that's when you need to have a procedure in place that you go verify and you call that company directly. You don't just respond to an email you received, you actually pick up the phone. So if you look down on here, there's a list of different examples. And one I've seen I want to bring up because this can happen with any type of association, from chambers to if you volunteer, like I said, with the National Kitchen and Bath Association. For them, I'm a treasurer. So I get emails all the time from the president of the National Kitchen and Bath Association asking me to redirect money. Now I know better because this is what I do for a living. This is not real. I can look and hover and see that it really isn't her email address. So the point here is if somebody's asking you to send money, first of all, if it's not normally in the line of what you do, that really is a red flag. But two, even if this is what you do, it doesn't hurt to pick up the phone and call just to verify. Having a process in place, because unfortunately, this is all too common and people and businesses fall for it. Ransomware. And I know we've all heard of this one over the last few years. The Colonial Pipeline one, I think it was last year. And they ended up paying over $4 million to get their information released. During the pandemic, there was a university out of California that was working on the COVID shot. And they also too became a victim of ransomware. They did also pay the ransom because of the research that they had done. I knew a small business in Hawaii who had this happen to them. She refused to pay. So she had to go back and rebuild all of her accounting. Now, I will tell you, with backups, this makes this a little easier. You can say, I'm not paying, and you can go and back things up. Of course, you don't want to back everything and put it back on the system that currently has the ransomware. You need to get that all cleaned off. But you want to have options, because we all know running any business and losing our information is just not it's not going to work. It's probably going to put us under. So that's why those backup copies are really important. And of course, ransomware does come in again through those phishing emails, and they exploit any of those unpatched vulnerabilities, which is why it's so important to keep all of our software current and updated. So just a little bit to tell you about at BBB, we do a scam, risky scam every year. And we usually do it consumer focused, but we have some business numbers. So first of all, businesses are not scammed at the same level as consumers, which is good news, but it's still money lost is hard for any business. So the top riskiest scams for businesses were that fake invoice supplier bill. Again, I kind of mentioned that maybe they new bank account or new mailing address, or they're not even a vendor and it slips into the accounting department and they haven't verified this person. The bank credit card company imposter, and the worthless problem solving services. I had to look that one up because I didn't know what that meant. And it's really where you hire a company that's promising you that they can do all of these different things to help you increase your business, but they really aren't. And unfortunately, there are a lot of scams out there surrounding that. One I've seen, just to share with you, sometimes you'll get a call, depending on what industry you're in, and they'll say, we sell advertising for country clubs. Now, I used to work in construction, and so that was enticing to us, except for it wasn't real. I actually called the country club and they said that they don't do any advertising like that. They don't do a newsletter that has any advertising. So be careful what people offer, because it's easy to get caught up and not verify that it's a legitimate opportunity. So how can we protect ourselves and how can businesses protect themselves? We talked some, but here's a summary of it. First of all, the key is train and inform your employees. Now, what if you don't have all the resources at hand? Go to bbb.org. On our page, as you go down, you will see articles for consumers and for businesses. And usually we talk about what we're seeing in the communities and what we're hearing. So if there's fraud associated with it, you'll usually find it there. And those are great stories to share to help educate. You have to be a little tech savvy. You have to have a little of an understanding more than just turning on the computer. So it might require a little more education. Engage that multi-factor authentication. Also, one thing you can do on your email settings is change it so that if any email is coming from outside of your organization to you, it notes it. And you may have seen them where you get the email and says this email came from outside your organization. Where that's really good is when they're especially trying to impersonate the CEO, because it didn't come from his account, right? So it's coming from outside and they're trying to impersonate. So having that on there is very helpful. But in business and in anything in life, always know who you're dealing with. Do not take anything just based on because they said it in an email or they said it on social media. Always know what company you're doing business with. Training on how to detect and avoid scams, really helpful with your staff to keep them updated. And that goes back to that training and informing. Talking about it and sharing information is really important. We do know the more people are able to share about fraud, the easier it is for people to spot it, right? And to be aware, and then they can share it with their friends. Here's a tip when it comes to any type of fraud, it's psychology is what they're using. No matter how it's dressed up, they appeal to our emotions, whether it's happiness, sadness, fear, they find some way to appeal to our emotion. So once you start to think emotionally and not rationally, you really need to put the brakes on. Look at your email rules. And do not ask me how they're able to break into your system. That I haven't figured out myself, but they can hack in and they can redirect your emails. And not all of them. They won't redirect all of them. They'll just redirect those that say bill, payment, anything to do with money. And instead of you getting that email, they will get it. And they can redirect people's payments. And yes, I've actually had that one happen to me. And luckily enough, the customer caught it and said, hold it, did you send this email? And this was prior to working for BBB. And I said, no, that's not how I do things. And so we were able to let all of the customers know. However, it can happen. And then we talk about, remember, changing the passwords every 3 months. Well, limit how many times you can incorrectly input it, which always backfires on me, right? It does, probably some of you as well. But the reason for that is they're trying to break in, and you really want something there to protect it. Now, let me look at the time here. I have this great video, but instead of showing it now, what I'll do is I will send this to Vivian and she can share it with you guys. It's a fun video that talks about a little bit more about cybersecurity in a very engaging way. But I really would prefer we get to some questions. Oh, see, I'm not gonna, it was gonna play, but we're not gonna play it. Again, I'm Roseann with Better Business Bureau. We talked today about our safeguarding privacy. Here is my direct information though. Should you need to email me or call me, you'll notice I am not based in Seattle. I am based in Hawaii. My Seattle counterpart was not available today, so I got to fill in for him. I'm really excited, but we're all on the same team. So go ahead and reach out to me. I can answer those questions. And I'm going to share a PDF copy of this presentation as well as the link to the video with Vivian. And in the meantime, if you guys want to pop in any questions or come off camera, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so do we have any questions? Anybody, any input? Or a story to share, something that might have happened to you as well?
Roseann, I think we also missed, I just remembered that poll that I thought was
Yes. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you remembered it. That's why Vivian's here. Okay, we're going to put a poll up and this will help us get started. Because remember, I alluded to this question earlier. And the question is, according to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, how many small businesses close after a cyber attack? So just pick one of those numbers. How many of them completely shut down and do not survive a cyber attack? Okay, well, if we're looking at the numbers, obviously we couldn't all agree, could we? So the correct answer is 60%. Yeah, 60%. That's a large number of small businesses that don't survive. And part of that has a lot to do with the fact that, one, the remedy they have to pay to help the people whose information has been stolen, but also the trust that is eroded in their company. It's why it's important for any small business, because you don't want your business to suffer and go under just because someone hacked into your system. So you need a plan. And that plan includes those 5 pieces of identifying, protecting, detecting, respond, and recovery. And it doesn't have to be anything super elaborate. You may be a one-man shop, but having something in place so you know who to check with is really important. Any other questions? The password managers, I know a lot of people who use them, just like anything else. They're really good in the sense that they make for much longer passwords. So the key is to make sure the company that you're using has a really good track record, right? And they are also known to have a reputation, a trustworthy reputation, because it does help you manage all of those passwords. But it always goes back to who you know, or what you know about any company and whether you should interact with them. But it was a really good question.
I have a question, Roseann. Earlier you mentioned, we know it's not best practice to take information back and forth on a USB. Do you have any recommendations of other ways people can transport their data?
So the one way I have done it myself is, and especially because a lot of my interactions not even more physical anymore, is to upload it to like a Google Drive or a Dropbox, a secure platform with a good reputation where I can upload it and then I can share that link and then they can download it. So that prevents any virus from getting in that way. So that's another option from using your just regular USB devices.
Thank you.
So if you've taken nothing away, back up, really important. The company that was hit, that my friend who owned a cabinet shop, small cabinet shop, and was hit, it doesn't take much. You don't have to have a big company making lots of money for them. Anything they can get, they will take. And that's probably the biggest takeaway. So if you don't have that tech savvy yet and you need to learn, find a company you can trust and start there.
All right, thank you, Roseann. If we don't have any more questions, then I think I will begin wrapping us up. Let's see. So thank you so much for that presentation. Yeah, I learned a lot. I think one of the things that I'm very guilty of is not locking my screen when I walk away from my laptop. So luckily, our IT doesn't go around and mess with our desktops. But that's something I will personally try to work on moving forward. And I hope that everybody else has, a small or large takeaway they're able to implement this week moving forward for either, their personal or business security. So thank you very much, Roseann. And before we go, I'd also like to take another chance to thank our event sponsors for their continued support of the Chamber's programming: Seattle Public Utilities, Business Health Trust, and Reach King County. And again, I would also like to thank our small business champions, Kaiser, Boeing, JLL, and Amazon. And I also want to give one last quick plug for the Chamber. If you liked the presentation today, if you're interested in becoming a member, or you're interested in learning more about our fall programs, we have a lot of good events coming up towards the end of the year. You can go ahead and visit us at seattlechamber.com. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, thank you, Roseann, and thank you all of our sponsors. We hope to see you either at an in-person or a virtual event later this year.